Imagine being born with the strength to tear apart a lion with your bare hands. Imagine living your life knowing that you are destined for greatness, chosen by God for a purpose greater than yourself. But what if, despite your divine gift, the greatest battle you would face was not the enemy before you, but the desires and weaknesses within your own heart? In the land of ancient Israel, during a time when the people were oppressed by the Philistines, there was a man named Manoah and his wife, who lived in a humble home in the town of Zorah. This couple had long desired to have children, but no matter how much they prayed, the years passed, and their hope dwindled. The pain of childlessness weighed heavily on them, especially in a time and place where being unable to bear children was seen as a curse. Manoah's wife, a woman of quiet faith, grieved in silence, wondering if their dream of raising a child would ever come true. Despite the whispers of despair that threatened to overtake her, she clung to her faith, reminding herself that God's timing was always perfect, though often mysterious. She longed for the day when her house would be filled with the laughter of children. But in the silence of her grief, God was preparing a way. One day, while she was alone, an angel of the Lord appeared to her. His presence was awe-inspiring, and his face shone with divine radiance. The angel spoke to her, calling her by name, "You are barren and childless, but you are going to conceive and bear a son. No razor will ever be used on his head because the boy is to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will begin the deliverance of Israel from the hands of the Philistines." Judges 13 verse 3. This was no ordinary message, it was a divine prophecy, and it filled her heart with both joy and reverence. The child she would bear was not just an answer to her prayers but a key figure in God's plan to liberate Israel from its enemies. Her son, Samson, would be set apart for a special purpose. He would have supernatural strength, a strength that would not come from his own will but from God himself. She was to raise this child knowing that he was destined to lead Israel into a new era of freedom and restoration. Overwhelmed by the weight of this revelation, she rushed to tell her husband, Manoah. But Manoah, though deeply moved, was filled with awe and uncertainty. This message was so incredible, so impossible that he wasn't sure if he could believe it. Manoah, filled with reverence, prayed to God and asked, "Lord, please send the man of God again to us to tell us how to bring up the boy who is to be born." Judges 13 verse 8. In his heart, Manoah felt the gravity of this promise. He knew that raising such a child would require divine wisdom. The angel's words were too momentous to be taken lightly. God, in his mercy, answered Manoah's prayer. The angel returned, reassuring him that everything spoken was true and confirming the plan for Samson's life. The child was to be a Nazirite, which meant that he would be set apart from birth, living a life dedicated to God, never cutting his hair, never drinking wine, and never touching anything unclean. His life was to be one of holiness and divine service. The angel also promised that Samson would be used to deliver Israel from the Philistines, a prophecy that stirred hope in Manoah's heart. As time passed, the couple's joy was made complete when Samson was born. His parents raised him in the knowledge of his calling, continually reminding him of the great purpose for which he had been chosen. Samson's mother made sure that every detail of his upbringing reflected his divine purpose. She carefully adhered to the Nazirite vow, ensuring that Samson's life was filled with holiness and devotion to God. The weight of this calling rested heavily on Samson's mother, but she raised her son with both love and solemnity, understanding that this child was no ordinary child. Samson was to be more than just a son, he was to be a deliverer, the one who would initiate God's plan to free Israel from the Philistines. As Samson grew, his strength became apparent to everyone around him. But this strength was not ordinary. As a young man, Samson was filled with the Spirit of God, and it empowered him to do things that defied human logic. One day, while journeying to Timnah, Samson encountered a lion that roared at him with fury. Most men would have been terrified, but Samson, with the Spirit of God upon him, tore the lion apart with his bare hands as if it were nothing more than a young goat. Judges 14 verses 5 to 6. This moment was symbolic. It wasn't just a demonstration of physical strength. It was a sign of the supernatural power that was with him. This strength would become his hallmark, but it was also a responsibility. With power came great responsibility. Yet, Samson, though aware of his calling, was just like any other young man. He had desires, emotions, and a heart that would be tempted by the world. As Samson entered adulthood, his fame spread across Israel. He was known for his incredible feats of strength, but he was also known for his pride. His victories, though magnificent, began to fuel his self-reliance. In Judges 15 verse 15, after defeating 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of a donkey, Samson declared, "With a donkey's jawbone, I have killed 1,000 men." His words reflected the growing pride in his heart. He began to believe that his strength was his alone, and not a gift from God. Samson's pride became his first weakness. He began making decisions based on his own desires and his own judgment. Though chosen by God for a higher purpose, Samson allowed his emotions and desires to cloud his reasoning. One day, Samson's heart was captivated by a woman from the Philistine town of Timnah. Despite his parents' objections, who urged him to marry someone from his own people, Samson insisted, "Get her for me. She is the right one for me." Judges 14 verse 3. This decision was the beginning of a downward spiral. Samson's desire for this woman was driven by lust, not by the will of God. He had fallen prey to temptation, and this temptation would soon blind him to the consequences of his choices. His parents, worried about the wisdom of this choice, tried to convince him to marry someone within their own faith, but Samson, blinded by love and desire, refused to listen. At his wedding feast, Samson posed a riddle to his guests, wagering a reward for anyone who could solve it. But when his wife was pressured by the Philistines to reveal the answer, she betrayed him. In blind rage, Samson killed 30 Philistines to settle his debt, and his relationship with the Philistines began to deteriorate further. Judges 14 verse 19. This moment was a turning point in Samson's life. His pride, impulsiveness, and his inability to control his emotions began to shape his destiny. The path of destruction had been set, and it was clear that his desires and human weaknesses were leading him away from the calling of God on his life. But it was his relationship with Delilah, a woman from the valley of Sorek, that would ultimately lead him to the greatest betrayal. Delilah was approached by the Philistine rulers, who offered her a great sum of money if she could discover the secret of Samson's strength. She, unaware of the true danger of her actions, began to press Samson for the truth. At first, Samson lied to her, giving her false answers. But Delilah, motivated by greed and the promise of money, persisted. She wore him down with her nagging, saying, "How can you say you love me when you won't tell me the truth?" Eventually, Samson gave in. In a moment of weakness and blind trust, he revealed the secret of his strength, that his unshorn hair was the source of his power, a sign of his Nazirite vow. Judges 16 verse 17. Delilah, having now gained the information she sought, betrayed Samson. As he slept, she cut his hair, and when Samson awoke, he realized his strength was gone. The Philistines seized him, blinded him, and bound him in chains. They took him to Gaza, where he was thrown into prison and forced to grind grain like an animal. Samson, once a mighty warrior, was now powerless and humiliated. But in this lowest moment, God was at work. His hair began to grow back, a sign that God's grace and restoration were beginning to take root. While in prison, Samson began to reflect on his mistakes and his fall from grace. He understood now that his strength had never been his own, it had always been God's gift. Samson realized that his pride had caused him to stray from his divine purpose. But even in the darkness of his prison, God had not forsaken him. One day, the Philistine rulers threw a great feast in the temple of their god, Dagon, to celebrate their victory over Samson. They brought him out to mock him, making him a spectacle. But Samson, in that moment, knew that this was his final opportunity to fulfill the purpose for which he had been born. Samson's final prayer was a cry for strength and deliverance, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Judges 16 verse 28. With renewed strength, Samson pushed against the two central pillars of the temple. The temple collapsed, killing thousands of Philistines, including the rulers who had mocked him. Samson's final act of sacrifice was the beginning of Israel's deliverance. Though Samson died in the process, his death marked the beginning of freedom for Israel. His legacy lived on as a testimony to the power of redemption and God's grace. Through his sacrifice, God's purpose was fulfilled, and the people of Israel would eventually rise up, find their freedom, and overcome the Philistines. Life lessons from Samson's story. Our strength comes from God. Samson's strength was never his own. Whatever gifts or abilities we have, they are gifts from God, meant to serve His purpose, not our own desires. Pride leads to fall. Samson's pride blinded him to his weaknesses. We must always remain humble and remember that without God, we are nothing. Temptation will test us. Samson's story is a reminder that even the strongest among us can fall victim to temptation. But God is greater than the temptations we face, and He offers a way of escape. Redemption is always possible. No matter how far we have fallen, God offers redemption. Samson's life shows that even after failure, we can still fulfill God's purpose. Sacrifice is often the path to victory. Samson's final act of sacrifice was the key to Israel's freedom. Sometimes, it is through sacrifice that we fulfill God's ultimate plan. Closing prayers. Prayer for strength and purpose. Lord, thank you for the gifts you've given me. Help me to use them to fulfill your purpose. May I never forget that my strength comes from you and not my own abilities. I surrender my pride, my desires, and my will to you. Guide me, strengthen me, and use me for your glory. Prayer for humility and obedience. Father, forgive me for the times I've relied on myself instead of trusting in you. Help me to be humble in all that I do and obedient to your voice. Remove the pride in my heart and fill me with the strength to follow your will, no matter the cost. Prayer for redemption. God, I thank you for your endless grace. No matter how far I've fallen, I know you are there to restore me. I pray for your forgiveness and ask that you help me walk in the purpose you have set for me. Strengthen me once again, O Lord, and use me to bring glory to your glory in Jesus' name. Amen.